this video is going to cover a little bit more about the behind the scenes of how I work with the client and the illustrator to end up with what you see on the screen. This is just one spread in I think there were 18 spreads in this book. But this process I'm going to show you is what we do for every spread. And then we do it all over again for the cover as well. So it's very in-depth, and I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible and just go through the a bird's eye view of what happens through the process. So this is how we ended up. This is what was finalized for the bulk print run. But if you look over here to the right of my screen, you can see that I've got some setup here, and that this is what we're going to go through. So I'm going to turn this layer off, and this is part of the creative brief that I send the illustrator. The author and I have already worked through which text goes on which page. We've already worked through the style of art, and we've kind of thought the book through to get us started. And now our goal is to always stick to the creative brief as closely as possible to avoid any scope creep. And so the author and I have already determined, okay, we want there to be dialogue bubbles in this book, and we also want there to be narrative text. So we've got, we actually have other layers of text, other levels of text that we're working with, but for this spread, we're just going to be working with narrative text and dialogue text. So in the creative brief that I send the illustrator, you can see I have art notes up here. Let me do that again. The parents are also superheroes and should be in their costumes. Kids are settling in at their desks, hanging up backpacks and making friends. So you can see we really did not give her a lot of micromanagement here. When you hire an illustrator, you're hiring that illustrator because you like the art that they create from their spirit. So we do want to give them parameters, but a good illustrator is going to be able to take our parameters, blend it with their style, and deliver the storyboard. That is part of what you're paying. When you pay an illustrator a lot of money. Not everybody does, I get that. But when you are investing a lot of money in your illustrator, part of what you're leaning on them for is their storyboarding skills. How can they take our text and our parameters and bring that to life through their art? So at the top, we have in gray the main art note. Then we have, on the rest of the spread, this is the text that we're going to have on this spread. And then I have for her what's going to be in a speech bubble versus what's going to be narrative text. And then I also have like some additional notes for her. So this is what she starts with. And then I also send a template. This is part of the creative brief that says, okay, we're working with an 8.5 by 11. Here is our bleed, here is our margins, and here are the center points on each page, vertically and horizontally, just to help possibly make it easier for the illustrator to know more technical parameters here. And so armed with the overlay template and the creative brief, she then turns around the first look at the storyboard. Every illustrator is different, but this is Emilee's style of storyboarding, and you can see how she already knew, like I had already briefed her in the creative brief, she has liberty to move the text wherever she thinks wherever she wants to illustrate around that text, where she thinks it should go. And we let her set the stage for, I'm thinking the text can go here. And then we revise that if we want to during the revision round. So you can see here, she's got the text at the top, she's got the speech bubbles, and then the text looks very rough right now, but that's what the storyboard is for. It is all very rough because we don't want anyone spending any extra time on something that we're not going to approve to begin with. So we're just starting out with some rough concepts here. Do we like these ideas? If yes, they get leveled up in the next round. If not, we get some new storyboards to work with. So, okay, we approved this. We had a few notes for her. We send her notes. And just to kind of show you what's going on here, I mean, it's evident to me because I have lived in this book for a year. But what you're going to see happen are these are the little super students down here. And then we have the teacher, Stan. And then we have one of the parents. And then we have the class pet, Spiky. This is him over here. And right now, this was a chalkboard or a whiteboard, I guess. I'm showing my age when we had chalkboards. And then this was a window. So this was take one. And then for round two, we really liked most of what she had. We just had a few suggestions. And one of those suggestions was removing the whiteboard or moving it over and making this a big window so we could see more parents. Because in storyboard one, we just had one parent. And so Ariane wanted to see more parents. And so the window allowed us to do that. And not just seeing parents, but seeing the superhero-ness of these parents as well as they drop off their kids. And we have some interaction here between kid and parent, you know, bye dad. This is gymnastica, and so we wanted to show her doing something gymnastic-y. This is Pet Pal, so we wanted to show him engaging with the class pet. Flyboy, so he's up there flying. And yeah, this was, which one was this? I can't remember off the top of my head which one that is in the storyboard, but you're going to see them come to life even more in the next round, which is the line art. So we gave her our feedback on round two, and that concluded the storyboarding round. So when you hire an illustrator, to avoid scope creep, you need to have these things in place. Like we're doing 2 rounds of storyboarding, 2 rounds of line art, and 2 rounds of color. And anything beyond that is dictated by the contract. You know, extra revisions are X amount, and that's why a contract is necessary as well. So again, we always want to avoid scope creep because that's never fun for the designer or for the illustrator or for the editor. But that's why the author and I work very closely for several weeks before we ever even send this to an illustrator, because my job as the publishing facilitator is to help make this process as smooth as possible. And by the time it gets to the illustrator, we don't want to burden her with things that she's not paid to do. Okay, so now we've given our notes on storyboard and on round 2, and now we move to line art. Again, this is Emilee's process. Every illustrator will have a slightly different look to how their storyboards and line arts go. This was Emilee's line art round 1, and I'm just going to toggle between this and this so you can see a slight adjustment, just some little adjustments here. We changed Gymnastica's position, and Emilee may have done that herself. You can just see, like if you just focus on one thing and then as I flip, you can just see some minor differences that are occurring between storyboard round 2 and line art round 1. And then we go to line art round 2. So it's getting more and more like to the finished stage. Like we're committing to what Emilee has shown us. Yes, we like these expressions. Yes, we like these positions. Yes, we like this placement. We like the whole vibe. Keep going. And so you may notice, let me back up. Okay, because I have to loop back to this in a little bit. But on storyboard round 1, we do have this text here. The first day in room 17 at Midtown School for Young Heroes was just like any other first day in any other kindergarten. The children met their teacher, said goodbye to their parents, only some cried. But then when we get up here to line art round 2, like, oh, the text changed a little bit. And that's because Ariane and I were looking at different ways to set up the title page. And originally we had this, originally, sorry, let me back up. Originally the title page was not going to have any text on it, or the first page was not going to have any text on it. And then we're like, well, let's add the text. Like, okay, let's make the intro art with Teacher Stan with text. And so we took what Emilee had done for the title page, and then we were going to make that page 1 of the art. And but we ended up putting the text back on the first intro spread, and then using this art of Teacher Stan as the title spread art. So a little segue there. Okay, so line art round 2. Okay, so now we're getting into color. I do want to say also, this text, the illustrator is not setting the text. I provide her the text file because we're working in tandem between Photoshop and InDesign. So Emilee works in Photoshop. The core of my work is done in InDesign. I do work in Photoshop for some just different things that have to do with the book design. But between the illustrator and I have one InDesign file. I place her Photoshop files in it, and then I'm setting the text as we go, finagling things, communicating with her. And you can see how, let me back up to line art round, okay, storyboard. Okay, see on storyboard round 2 how these speech bubbles are bigger. They're not formed to the text, but then Ariane and I are shoring up the exact font settings we want for those dialogue bubbles. And after we have it locked in, the font, the size, the leading, the line breaks, then I update that text to Emilee, and she forms the speech bubbles around this text. And this is the big difference, just one of the differences I see between someone who hires an illustrator and isn't really involved in the process, or they don't have a book designer, is the illustrator just leaves enough space for something to go there. Whereas when I'm working with an illustrator, it is very important that the text and the art work together in unison. And this is just one thing that sets your levels of book designing apart, right? So whereas we have, I left you enough space versus I crafted it to your text. And that is a big difference in the books that I design, as long as that's what the author wants. Some authors don't want a form-fitting speech bubble. And so my goal is just to always find out what the priorities are for the author, and then direct the illustrator based on those priorities. Okay, so line art 1, 2, and now we're ready to go into some coloring. And so here is Emilee's first pass at the coloring, and we're loving it. We don't really have a lot of changes for her between round 1 and now I'm fixing to flip up to round 2. So really I mean, the text color changed because I had color coded the text. I like to color code stuff as we're working on the book, just to help with visual cues. But we didn't put colored text in the book. It was all going to be black to begin with. So now I've set everything to black, and there just wasn't any differences really. We approved this spread. We were good with it, and so she tidied up the layers and stuff for me, and that was the conclusion of round 2 for the interior. Now this was just one spread, but what I want to show you is, okay, we approved color round 2. Emilee was done. You know, we got her to a point where she had completed what she was contracted for, and then the author wanted to change up a few things, and so she decided to go, since this was all part of the reworking the title page spread, even though we had originally started with this text, and then we bumped the text, and then after I did the Super Students title page spread where it went across the page like this, then we retooled the text so that it started on this spread. And you'll notice the paper chain. The paper chain was gone because we had also looked at, well, maybe we don't want the paper chain. But I really loved the paper chain, and I just felt it looked naked without it. And so Ariane and I went back and forth on that. And then when it went to print proof, this is actually the what we got in the print proof was no chain, I believe. And but before we went to bulk print, we decided, yes, let's add that chain back in. It does make a difference. But we also made some other very minor changes between, I'm going to toggle between what went to print versus where Emilee exited spread 1. So we had this is where she left us, and this is where we ended up. Okay, where she left us, where it ended up. Again, very minor changes, and none of this would have been really possible. Like, we would have had to have gotten the illustrator involved again if she had not worked in layers as I had requested early on in the process. So before we ever signed her, she knew that I was going to require a lot of layers and groups, and I want everything labeled, and I want backgrounds completed. I call it like a felt board strategy, right? I want everything to be complete. That way, if I have to move a character, I don't have to go build background to do that, or I don't have to go back to the Illustrator to build that background. As a book designer, you're also, you're a graphic designer. You're a bit of an artist in your own right. Not that I could ever do what the illustrators can do, but I can take what they've done and develop it as needed with my own skill set to avoid having to go back to them. Because after you've worked with them for months, 6 months to a year, even though we all love the project, we're all getting tired of it. The author too, like, you don't think you're ever going to be tired of working on the project, but after you've looked at that spread 50 times and you've spent, hours just on one page, you're just like, ah. So I try to save the illustrator from that feeling. I like to make sure everybody is happy, and that we're not having scope creep. But the illustrator does also have, I send them the file for review so they can, if they're like, oh, let me edit this, right? Because it's never done. You always have something you want to do, especially if it's been a while since you looked at the project. You're like, oh my God, how did I leave that out? Or how did I not notice that? So I like to give the illustrators the same opportunities that I give myself. and the author as well. So now that we've got all that out of the way, I'm going to show you the foundation of the file that allowed me to make these changes without having to go back to Emilee. So let me truncate all this. And I'm going to open up the layered file that Emilee created. Make sure I'm recording. Okay. And so here is the layered file that Emilee recorded. And if you look here on the right, you can see all these nice, neat layers, groups. So I can toggle all of these off and on. Here's the classroom layer. And within the classroom group, here is the teacher desk, the backpacks, the paper chain, the line art, the rug, and then her coloring. And then, so that's my background layer. Now I have, here is a skater and his dad. And then that's their own group. And within there are different layers. Spikey's cage and the dresser. And then Spikey gets added. Pet Pal, Teacher Stan, X-Ray Girl, Bando, Flyboy, Bellow, the table, Gymnastica, pillows, bubble gum, front table, bookshelf, speech bubble 2, or actually that's 1. And so you can see how beneficial that can be to the process if we're using this felt board way of working, because when Ariane wanted to go from this, or actually she wanted to go from this to this, and then we went from this to this, I was only able to do that as good as I did. I don't know if that's correct grammar, as well as I did, as goodly, because Emilee had worked in those layers. So I was able to adjust, see how Flyboy, we moved him up, he gets moved up. And then I also had to modify the lighting up here. That was its own layer. I modified the paper chain had to be modified. We actually reduced that. You can see how it's we took it from up out of the corner. Yeah, so we did some things there, and then how we slightly altered the placement in the window. So just some little things that were again, that I was able to modify because Emilee had worked. It was actually, if we go to, well, now I have all of these 10 layers that I added, but if we go to our info panel and look here, you can see it says it is 192 layers and 45 groups. So I think I added 12 layers. So, but essentially Emilee created 180 layers and 45 groups. And that is what I require when I'm working with an illustrator. And that's why it's important I'm interviewing the illustrator, I'm communicating with them, especially if I'm working with a brand new illustrator that they've never worked with a book designer before, or they've never worked with someone at my level before, is they don't know these things, and they create, one reason they don't charge enough, or one reason their rates are low, is because they're not working in layers. It takes time to create all of these layers. It takes time to label them. It takes time to work with me to suss out, oh, this is the perfect place for the text, please do this to the art, and to go through character sketches, 2 rounds of storyboard, 2 rounds of line art, 2 rounds of color for every spread on the interior, and then to do it all over again for the cover. And so my goal is the illustrator just focuses on the art, and I'm doing the text and the final file production and the communication with the author through all of this. So I hope you've enjoyed a look at at some of the process. We did get our bulk order in. It looks fantastic. I'll be doing an updated video on that. But let me know if I can answer any questions. Because if you're like me, you probably have a lot of questions if this is the first time you're seeing something like this. I always tell people when someone works with me to create a book, I'm like, you're never going to look at a book the same way again after you've completed your project. And because it's very true. If y'all only knew what it really takes to make this level of book, you would pay more than $19.99 for these books. So much work goes into these, and that's why it's important that we are doing everything that we can to make sure it's as successful as it can be, because we all have a lot of time and energy and love invested in these projects. Okay, all right, y'all have a good day. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Melinda Martin, publishing facilitator and designer of quality books for kids and adults. If you're interested in publishing your own quality book, learn more at melindamartin.me.